In a television studio in Los Angeles, preparations for one of primetime's most-watched talk shows were complete. The stage lights illuminated an energetic audience, eagerly anticipating the sharp humor and hard-hitting questions host Alex Brooks was known for. A well-known liberal figure, Alex had built his reputation by challenging his guests without hesitation. "Tonight, we have a very special guest," Alex announced, his tone carrying a hint of sarcasm. "Someone you probably never expected to see on this stage." A wave of curiosity swept through the audience. Whispers filled the room, and all eyes turned toward the stage as Melania Trump appeared gracefully from behind the curtains. Her white suit accentuated her elegance and strength. As the crowd reacted, some applauding and others exchanging surprised glances, Melania stepped forward with a calm expression. She confidently took her seat across from Alex and said, "Thank you for inviting me." Her soft but distinct accent gave her words a gentle rhythm. While some in the audience remained skeptical, Alex, momentarily caught off guard, quickly regained his composure. Flashing his signature grin, he replied, "Thank you for joining us, Melania." The show began with Alex's usual mix of humor and polite questions, creating an air of casual conversation. But this veneer of normalcy wouldn't last long. Behind the scenes, Alex had meticulously prepared questions designed to push boundaries and explore controversial topics with his guest. "How has life been after the White House?" Alex asked with a slight smile. Without hesitation, Melania responded, "My life is peaceful. I spend time with my family, focus on my projects, and continue helping children." Her calm demeanor seemed to momentarily disarm Alex, even as the audience listened intently. Alex, unwilling to let the conversation remain superficial, leaned forward to press further. "But we have to admit," he said, his tone sharpening, "you were often criticized during your time as First Lady for staying silent on certain issues. What's your take on that?" Melania met his gaze without flinching. "I have always believed that actions speak louder than words," she replied. "Talking is easy, but making a real difference is hard. I focus on what I can do, not on what others expect of me." Her response sparked murmurs among the audience. Alex, sensing an opportunity, decided to dig deeper. "But aren't there moments," he pressed, "when words are necessary, especially during a national crisis?" Melania paused briefly. The audience held its breath, trying to interpret the weight of her silence. Finally, she answered, "People have different roles. My role was to support my husband and our country in my own way." Alex, clearly not satisfied with her answer, pushed further. "But does supporting your husband mean staying silent about behaviors that many consider divisive?" His question reverberated through the room, drawing everyone's attention to the stage. Melania's expression remained steady, though a subtle spark in her eyes suggested she was prepared for this moment. "Division has always existed," she said calmly. "It's easy to blame one person for it, but that doesn't solve the problem. I choose to focus on being a unifier rather than pointing fingers." A palpable shift in the room's atmosphere could be felt. The audience seemed divided, silently debating who had the upper hand in the exchange. Yet Melania's measured and resolute demeanor only encouraged Alex to press harder. This was shaping up to be far more than an ordinary interview. The tension in the studio was palpable as Alex leaned forward, determined to press further. His audience expected him to push the limits, to bring out the raw, unfiltered truth from his guest. "Melania," he began with a sharp, yet controlled tone, "many people think your Be Best campaign, while noble in intention, lacked real impact. Critics say it was overshadowed by the controversies surrounding your husband's administration. Do you think it made a difference?" Melania met his gaze with unwavering calm. "I believe that every small step toward kindness and compassion matters," she responded. "The campaign was never about seeking headlines. It was about inspiring individuals, children, parents, teachers, to think about their actions and how they affect others. Change doesn't happen overnight, but the seeds we plant today can grow into something meaningful tomorrow." Her measured words seemed to temper the room, if only slightly. Alex, however, wasn't ready to let go of the topic. "But doesn't the context of your actions matter just as much as the actions themselves?" he pressed. "How can a message of kindness resonate when coming from a platform surrounded by division?" Melania paused for a moment, a flicker of emotion crossing her otherwise composed expression. Context matters, she admitted, but so does perseverance. If I had let every criticism dictate my choices, I wouldn't have done anything at all. My focus has always been on the children, not the politics. Alex nodded slightly, acknowledging the weight of her words, but still eager to challenge her further. Let's talk about politics then, he said, shifting gears. You've stayed largely out of the political spotlight since leaving the White House. Is that deliberate, or is it because you don't believe in the direction the country is heading? Melania's expression softened, her voice steady yet reflective. I believe in focusing on what I can control, she said. Politics can be divisive, and I've seen how it can consume people. My priority is my family and the causes I care about. That doesn't mean I'm indifferent. It means I choose a different path. Her answer was met with a mix of applause and murmurs from the audience. Alex sensed an opportunity to delve deeper, to uncover the layers of the enigmatic woman sitting across from him. You've been criticized for your silence during pivotal moments, he said. Moments when people expected you to take a stand. Do you regret not speaking out more? For the first time that evening, Melania's composure seemed to falter ever so slightly. Her eyes took on a distant look, as if she were recalling a memory she rarely revisited. Regret is a heavy word, she said softly. There are things I might have done differently, yes, but I also know that silence can speak louder than words. Sometimes it's not about what you say, but how you act. The room fell silent, Alex included. For a fleeting moment, the intensity of the exchange seemed to dissolve, replaced by a sense of mutual understanding, or at least curiosity. But Alex wasn't one to let a quiet moment linger too long. You've talked about your family being your priority, he said, his voice taking on a more personal tone. How has Barron handled life after the White House? Growing up in such a unique spotlight must have been challenging. Melania's face softened at the mention of her son. Barron is resilient, she said, a hint of pride in her voice. He has a good heart and a strong sense of who he is. As a mother, my role is to protect him and guide him, but he's growing into his own person. I couldn't be prouder of him. The sincerity in her voice was unmistakable, and for a brief moment, even Alex seemed disarmed. The audience, too, responded with a warm ripple of applause, a stark contrast to the earlier tension. Alex leaned back in his chair, a faint smile on his face. It's interesting, he said, almost to himself. You're far more candid than I expected tonight. Melania's lips curved into a small smile. I think people often see what they want to see, she replied. But I've always been honest about who I am. It's just that not everyone listens. The studio lights dimmed slightly, signaling a commercial break. As the cameras cut, Alex and Melania exchanged a glance that carried an unspoken agreement. The real conversation was only just beginning. The cameras returned from the break, the studio audience buzzing with anticipation. Alex Brooks straightened his posture, his polished demeanor masking the subtle shift in his approach. He had realized that Melania Trump was not a guest to be rattled easily, and if he wanted to uncover something truly compelling, he'd need to recalibrate. Melania, he began, his tone softer but still probing. You've spoken about your family, your initiatives, and your perspective on politics. But there's one question I think everyone here is curious about. Who is Melania Trump when the cameras are off? What's the side of you that the world never gets to see? The question hung in the air, and for the first time that evening, Melania hesitated. Her hands rested lightly on her lap, and she glanced at the audience, as if considering how much of herself she was willing to share. I am a mother, she said after a moment, her voice quieter than before. A wife, a friend. I am someone who values privacy, who finds joy in small, simple moments. When the cameras are off, I am just me. No titles, no expectations, just Melania. Her answer, though measured, carried a vulnerability that caught the audience off guard. Alex leaned forward, sensing an opportunity to connect on a more personal level. It sounds like you cherish the quieter parts of life, he said. But do you ever feel weighed down by the scrutiny that comes with being in the public eye? A faint sigh escaped Melania's lips. Scrutiny is part of the life I chose, she admitted, but it doesn't define me. People will always have opinions. They will judge, criticize, and speculate. My focus is on staying true to myself and the people I care about. That is what keeps me grounded." The audience, previously subdued, erupted into spontaneous applause, a testament to the authenticity of her words. Alex, though usually quick to steer the conversation, allowed the moment to breathe, the applause serving as an unspoken acknowledgement of her resilience. "Your perspective is refreshing," Alex said once the room had quieted. "But I have to ask, how do you navigate the contradictions? Balancing your personal values with the complexities of being married to one of the most polarizing figures in modern history?" Melania's expression didn't waver. If anything, it grew more resolute. "Life is full of contradictions," she said, "but I believe in focusing on what matters. My marriage, like any marriage, has its challenges, but it is built on trust, respect, and a shared understanding. The world may see one version of our lives, but only we know the truth." Her words carried a gravity that silenced even the most skeptical members of the audience. Alex, however, wasn't ready to let the moment pass without a deeper dive. "Speaking of your marriage," he said cautiously, "there have been countless rumors and controversies. Do you ever feel the need to address them directly, to set the record straight?" Melania's gaze sharpened, her calm exterior now underscored by a quiet determination. "Rumors are just that. Rumors," she said firmly. "I do not live my life to please others or to respond to every false narrative. I live my life with integrity, and that is enough for me." The studio erupted once more, the applause louder and more sustained than before. Melania's refusal to be cornered, her steadfast commitment to her own values, had struck a chord with the audience. Even Alex, known for his unrelenting style, seemed momentarily at a loss. "You're a fascinating guest," he said finally, a faint smile breaking through his polished exterior. "I'll admit I wasn't sure what to expect tonight, but you've certainly surprised me." Melania offered a polite smile in return. "Sometimes surprises are good," she said, her tone light but tinged with meaning. As the cameras cut to another break, the atmosphere in the studio shifted. What had begun as a high-stakes interview had transformed into something more profound, a dialogue that transcended politics and controversy, touching on themes of resilience, authenticity, and the human spirit. As the cameras returned for the final segment, the atmosphere in the studio was charged with a mix of admiration and anticipation. Alex Brooks, still composed but visibly humbled, leaned forward, his pen resting idle in his hand. He seemed to recognize that this was not just another interview. It was a moment that had already begun to resonate beyond the walls of the studio. "Melania," he began, his tone more reflective now, "you've spoken about the scrutiny, the challenges, and the resilience it takes to navigate your life in the public eye. But before we close tonight, I have one more question, one that I think encapsulates what so many people wonder about you." Melania met his gaze, her expression calm yet expectant. "Do you feel misunderstood?" Alex asked. "And if so, what would you say to the people who have formed opinions about you without ever truly knowing you?" The studio audience fell silent, the weight of the question settling over the room. For a moment, Melania didn't respond, her hands resting lightly on her lap. Then she straightened her posture, her eyes scanning the audience before returning to Alex. "Misunderstanding is part of life," she said finally, her voice steady and deliberate. "People see what they want to see. They create their own stories, their own truths. But I cannot live my life for other people. I live my life for my family, for my values, and for the causes I believe in." Her words hung in the air, resonating with a clarity that silenced even the most skeptical members of the audience. Alex nodded slowly, as if acknowledging the depth of her response. "That's a powerful perspective," he said, "but surely there are moments when the weight of it all feels overwhelming. How do you stay grounded?" Melania allowed herself a faint smile, the first hint of warmth she had shown all evening. "I focus on what truly matters," she said. "My son, my husband, my work. The rest is noise. And when life feels overwhelming, I remind myself that strength is not about avoiding challenges. It's about facing them with grace." The audience erupted into applause, the sound almost deafening as people rose to their feet. It was clear that, regardless of their political views or preconceived notions, Melania's composure and authenticity had struck a chord. Alex, visibly moved, leaned back in his chair, a genuine smile breaking through his polished demeanor. "Melania," he said, his voice carrying a newfound respect, "thank you for sharing your perspective tonight. I think it's safe to say you've given us all a lot to think about." Melania inclined her head slightly, her posture still poised. "Thank you for having me," she said. "It is important to have conversations, even when they are difficult." As the cameras cut to the final commercial break, the energy in the studio was electric. Behind the scenes, producers scrambled to prepare for the inevitable viral storm, their phones already buzzing with notifications. On stage, Alex leaned toward Melania, his voice low but sincere. "You've surprised me tonight," he admitted. "I didn't expect this level of honesty or grace." Melania offered a polite smile. "Sometimes people underestimate the quiet ones," she said simply. The audience buzzed with chatter as the show ended, people speculating about the impact of what they had just witnessed. Outside the studio, reporters and photographers clamored for a statement as Melania made her way to her car. Pausing briefly, she turned to the crowd, her expression calm but commanding. "I said what I needed to say," she stated. "The rest is for you to interpret." With that, she stepped into the car and disappeared into the Los Angeles night, leaving behind a nation captivated by her words.